Cidu sat in the attic, holding his breath and listening to the wailing of his sisters as the rebels raped them. His father shouted at them to stop, and one of the rebels hit him with the butt of his gun. Cidu's mother cried and apologized to her daughters for having brought them into this world to be the victims of such madness. After the rebels had raped his sisters over and over, they bundled the family's property and made the father and mother carry it. They took the three girls with them. To this day, I carry the pain that my sisters and my parents felt. When I climbed down after the rebels had gone, I couldn't stand, and my tears froze in my eyes. I felt like my veins were being harshly pulled out of my body. I still feel like that all of the time, as I can't stop thinking about that day. What did my sisters do to anyone? Saidu said after he was done telling us the story, one night in an abandoned village. My teeth became sour as I listened to his story. It was then I understood why he was so quiet all of the time. We should keep walking, Kanye said sadly as he dusted his pants. We had agreed to walk at night. During the day, we would search for food and take turns sleeping. At night, it felt as if we were walking with the moon. It followed us under thick clouds and waited for us on the other end of the dark forest paths. It would disappear with sunrise, but return again, hovering over our path the next night. Its brightness became dull as nights passed. Some nights the sky wept stars that floated quickly and disappeared into the darkness before our wishes could meet them. Under these stars and sky, I used to hear stories, but now it seemed as if the sky was telling us a story as its stars fell, violently colliding with each other. The moon hid behind clouds to avoid seeing what was happening. During the day, the sun refused to rise gradually as it had before. It became bright from the minute it surfaced from behind the clouds, its golden rays darkening my eyes. The clouds and the blue sky sailed violently, destroying each other's formation. One afternoon, while we were searching for food in a deserted village, a crow fell out of the sky. It wasn't dead, but it was unable to fly. We knew this was unusual, but we needed food, and anything at that point would do. As we took the feathers off the bird, Mariba asked what day it was. We all thought about it for a while, trying to remember the name of the last day when our lives were normal. Kanye broke the silence. It is a holiday, he laughed. You can call it any day you want, he continued. But it is not just a day, it is a strange one. I don't feel too good about it, Musa said. Maybe we shouldn't eat this bird. Well now, if the falling of this bird is a sign of curse or bad luck, we are in both, so I'm eating every bit of it. You can do as you please, Kanye began humming. After Kanye stopped humming, it became eerily silent. The breeze and the clouds stopped moving, and the trees were still as if they all were awaiting something unimaginable. Sometimes night has a way of speaking to us, but we almost never listen. The night after we ate the bird was too dark. There were no stars in the sky, and as we walked, it seemed as if the darkness was getting thicker. We weren't on a dense forest path, but we could barely see each other. We each held on to one another's hands. We kept on walking because we couldn't stop in the middle of nowhere, even though we wanted to. After hours of walking, we came upon a bridge made of sticks. The river below was flowing quietly as if asleep. As we were about to set foot on the bridge, we heard footsteps from the other side coming towards us. We let go of one another's hands and hid in the nearby bushes. I was lying with ALWG, Juma, and Cidu. There were 3 people. They were wearing white shirts. 2 of them were about the same height, and the third was shorter. They carried clothes under their arms. They too were holding hands, and when they stepped off the bridge where we lay, they stopped as if they sensed our presence. They mumbled something. It was difficult to hear what they were saying because their voices sounded like bees. Something was obstructing their noses. After they were done mumbling, the 2 taller people began pulling the shorter one. One of them wanted to go the way we were going. The other insisted on continuing in the opposite direction. This quarrel caused my heart to begin beating faster, and as I was trying to make out their faces, but it was too dark. After about a minute, we decided to continue going in the direction we had come from. It took us a few minutes to rise from under the bushes. Everyone was breathing hard and couldn't speak. Kanye began whispering our names. When he called out Cidu didn't answer. We searched for him among the bushes. He was lying there quietly. We shook him hard, calling out his name, but he was silent. ALWG and Juma began to cry. Kanye and I dragged Cidu onto the path and sat by him. He was just lying there. My hands began trembling uncontrollably as we sat throughout the night in silence. My head became heavy as I thought of what we were going to do. I do not remember who among us whispered, "Maybe it was that bird we ate." Most of my travel companions began to cry, but I couldn't. I just sat there, staring into the night as if searching for something. There wasn't a gradual change between night and day. The darkness just swiftly rolled away, letting the sky shine its light on us. We were all sitting in the middle of the path. Cidu was still quiet. His forehead had residues of sweat, and his mouth was slightly open. I put my hand to his nose just to see if he was breathing. Everyone stood up when I removed my hand. They were all looking at me as if expecting me to say something. I don't know, I said. They all put their hands to their heads. Their faces looked as if they wanted to hear something else, something that we knew could be possible, but was afraid to accept. What are we going to do now? Mariba asked. We cannot just stand here forever, Musa remarked. We will have to carry him to the next village, however far that may be, Kenny said slowly. Help me stand him up, he continued. We stood Saidu up, and Kenya carried him on his back across the bridge. The quiet river started flowing loudly through the rocks and palm kernels. As soon as we had crossed the bridge, Saidu coughed. Kenya set him down, and we all gathered around him. He vomited for a few minutes, wiping his mouth. He said, "Those were ghosts last night. I know it." We all agreed with him. I must have fainted after they started speaking. He tried to get up, and we all aided him. "I'm fine. Let's go." He pushed us away. "You woke from the dead with some attitude," Musa said. We all laughed and started walking. My hands began trembling again. I didn't know why this time. It was a gloomy day, and we kept asking Saidu if he was okay, all the way to the next village. It was past midday when we arrived at a crowded village. We were shocked by how noisy it was in the middle of the war. It was the biggest village we had been to so far. It sounded like a marketplace. People were playing music and dancing, children were running around, and there was the familiar good smell of cooked cassava leaf and rich palm oil. As we walked through the village, trying to find a place to sit away from the crowd, we saw some familiar faces. People hesitantly waved to us. We found a log under a mango tree and sat down. A woman whose face wasn't among the familiar ones came and sat facing us. "You," she pointed at my face. "I know you," she said. I did not know her face, but she insisted that she knew my family and me. She told me that Junior had come to the village a few weeks earlier, looking for me, and that she had also seen my mother and father and little brother in the next village, which was about 2 days' walk. She told us the direction and ended up by saying, "In that village, there are lots of people from Matujong and the Sierra Rutile mining area. All of you might be able to find your families, or news about them." She got up and began dancing to the sucrose music that was playing as she left. We all began laughing. I wanted to leave right away, but we decided to spend the night in the village. Also, we wanted Saidu to rest, even though he kept telling us that he was fine. I was so happy that my mother, father, and 2 brothers had somehow found one another. Perhaps my mother and father had gotten back together, I thought. We went to the river for a swim, and there we played hide-and-seek swimming games, running along the river's edge, screaming "cuckoo" to commence the game. Everyone was smiling. That night, we stole a pot of rice and cassava leaves. We ate it under the coffee trees at the edge of the village, washed the pots, and returned them. We had no place to sleep, so we chose a veranda on one of the houses after everyone had gone inside. I didn't sleep that night. My hands began shaking as soon as my friend started snoring. I had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. The dogs began to cry and ran from one end of the village to the other. Alhaji woke up and sat by me. "The dogs woke me up," he said. "I couldn't sleep to begin with," I replied. "Maybe you're just anxious about seeing your family," he chuckled. "I am too." Alhaji stood up. "Don't you think it's strange the way the dogs are crying?" One dog had come near the veranda on which we sat and was vigorously crying. A few more dogs joined in. Their crying pierced my heart. "Yes, they sound very human," I said. "That's the same thing I was thinking," Alhaji yawned. "I don't think dogs see things the way we do." Something must be wrong. He sat down. We became quiet, just staring into the night. The dogs cried all night long, one continuing until the sky was completely clear. Babies then began to take up the cry. People started getting up, so we had to vacate the veranda. Alhaji and I began waking our friends. When he shook Saidu, Saidu was still. "Get up, we have to go now." He shook Saidu harder as we heard the people on whose veranda we had slept getting ready to come outside. "Saidu, Saidu," Kanye coaxed him. "Maybe he fainted again," he said. A man came out and greeted us. He carried a small bucket of water. He had a smile on his face that had told us that he had known all along we were on the veranda. "This will do it." The man sprinkled some of the cold water from his bucket on Saidu. But Saidu didn't move. He just lay on his stomach, his face buried in the dust. His palms were turned upside down and they were pale. The man turned around and checked his pulse. Saidu's forehead was sweaty and wrinkled. His mouth was slightly open, and there was a path of dry tears at the corner of his eyes down the cheeks. "Do you boys know anyone in this village?" the man asked. We all said no, shaking our heads. He exhaled heavily, put his bucket down, and placed his hands on his head.